encouraging signs as it becomes evident that the executives at Arsenal listen to the podcast. This is the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, there was a fans forum. We're going to go over that with Tim. But they expressed that they wanted to do some things that were things that on the very last episode of this very podcast, we expressed needed to be done. And so I think it's evident. And look, I'm a big believer in Occam's razor. Absent any other information, the most obvious things must prove to be true. I think it can only be the case that they listen to the podcast. And, frankly, I want to welcome them. I want to welcome Vinai and Josh and Tim and Mr. Garlic is what we now call him on the podcast, and just say, guys, we have some suggestions. If you're taking our suggestions, since it does seem to be the case, I do think that Erling Haaland may make a big difference to us. Not that we want to push in direction of transfers, but just something to consider. Tim will join us after the break to discuss the fans forum and some of the things that came out of that and something that he's written about this week. But here with me now is Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Well, I'm, as you know, a little scrambled with the schedule today. I'm on a plane this morning, my time, which meant that we are recording the pod at a time we don't normally record it. I asked you guys if you were available at the time. You kindly said, yes, we are available at that time. And then I realized that the time I sent you was the wrong time. And now we are doing it at the wrong time, which is the right time for me, but the wrong time for you. So we're doing it in sections. That's how it's going to work. There will be an instant reaction after the Brentford game on Saturday. But as for yesterday, Clive, you and I did a Wolves rewatch available to patrons who want it. But even if you don't want it, we watched the first half, and I thought that there were some interesting things to take away from it. And I just sort of like to get, maybe having watched it and digested it now again, your thoughts on the evolution of the system. We'll talk about how that's going to impact Brentford. But the thing that does seem clear is that it is once again changing a little bit. It is not that traditional double pivot. It had pretty big ramifications from what we could see for the role of Xhaka in particular. And I'm curious how you feel about it, having watched it again.
Yeah, I suppose something I'm into at the moment. I did tweet on it this morning, right? So when I'm doing my own sort of team talks, I always talk about teams within teams and playing in pods, right? So in rugby, they have they use pods a lot, forwards that work together in pods and backs that work in pods, so you create overloads, etc. So I'm looking at Arsenal. I always like to talk about football in a very simplistic way, and it is very simplistic. It always is, right? So you have a left-sided pod which is developing with Tierney, Xhaka, and Martinelli, right? So that's the left-sided pod. You have a right-sided pod with Tommy or Cedric, with Odegaard and Saka. And you have a base pod, right? And we use a goalkeeper a lot, right? So that's changed this year. So the base pod's got Ramsdale, Gabriel, and White. And I call it the overburdened spine, the glue, the people that we look to hold this all together. And that is Partey and straight down the middle in Lacazette. And they're there as almost like offensive and defensive release valves and glue type players. And if you think about that in your mind, have the sort of triangle on the outsides, your line down the middle, your triangle at the back, you can sort of see the basis of your team structure in your own mind. And when you see that, you think, okay, that sounds interesting. So what can we do to make that better, right? So you can get a different dynamic in the right-hand channel as well with Odegaard, although he does look very slick. And it does sort of put a focus on Xhaka's role because, I'm talking about these sort of pods in an on-the-ball basis, shall we say. When you go off the ball, they slightly change. And Xhaka and Partey become a team together within the team as a screen in front. And so things slightly change, but you can't help but feel, because we all care about what we do on the ball primarily, even though majority of the game you're off the ball. So you do look at the Xhaka role and think, that's an interesting one. Could I have a little bit more deftness, agility, maybe a bit of carrying and penetration like Odegaard has got, but maybe a little bit more physicality in that role to create the balance that you need across the team, across the midfield? Can I offer something else in that position which may give Smith Rowe more chances to play there? Could Smith Rowe be part of the right-hand pod? It starts to make it quite interesting when you think about transfers, as I do most of my waking life. Think about transfers, how we can improve this group and how we can improve the dynamic and how we can change it. Could we add wing backs that completely change the starting position of Martinelli and Saka? And I think we're developing something here. And once you see that picture in your mind, I think we can all start to think about the players we'd all like to change to make it better. And that's just a continuous improvement mindset, which most fans have walking around every single day.
Well, and it's so interesting because there are players that you're still learning about, but there are always players in a team that you know that have been there a while, that you feel you know their strengths and weaknesses. And Shaq is certainly one that I think we know very well. He's a player that if you ask me, where do you want to deploy a player like that? Where's he going to thrive? I've always sort of felt he's a player where the more the game is in front of him, the more that he can look up and see the pitch and see big spaces and hit big crosses or, play a pass down the wing between two defenders, with pace like that. He can do that. But as the spaces get smaller, as the game shrinks in front of him and grows behind him, that would be an area where he might be less comfortable. And so now we find him between the lines more, in the half space, playing in Martinelli in the channels, playing Tierney in, but not with the big raking ball up the left-hand side, but the little stab pass out to the wing. And it's a little bit different. Now, when we drop into our low block, when we do get pushed back, the role is a lot more familiar. But one of the things that I thought was really encouraging about the start of the Wolves game, I couldn't believe how many times they gave it away trying to build play from the back because of our press. We're doing a great job filling the passing lanes and forcing them to go long. Yeah. Do we have to win more second balls? Absolutely. But in terms of not being able to play around us, I definitely think that our press has gotten better. And one of the reasons for that is the shape isn't as much 4-4-2 now. And those players, Odegaard and Xhaka, who are playing in the half space, playing like eights, are really helping to cut down the passing lanes. And Wolves really struggled to get out around it. So it is an interesting question, because if you're going to continue to do that, especially in a game like at home against Brentford, and you're going to try to take the ball off them from the back, when you win those balls back and you're switching quickly from defense to attack, and you're transitioning to trying to create chances with a quick one-time pass or carrying the ball into the penalty area and sliding it back for a striker if we had one of those things. Like, that is a very different remit, a very different set of objectives to what we might associate with Xhaka. And I have to say, I think Xhaka had maybe his best season for us last season, because he was able to see a lot of the game in front of him the way he was deployed. And this is a big change. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a player that we can move into that role in a different way. Now, it raises the question of the left side in general, because I also think a player, and this may have been because Wolves played with a five at the back, and so they had wing backs. But Clive
stretched this out,
yeah, it does. But it may have meant that Tierney was doing less of the sort of overlapping, pushing Martinelli more central. He had to cover more space going backwards. But like, watching it again, in real time, I thought it was an off game for Tierney. And watching back the first half, I didn't see anything to change my mind about that. And I'm wondering how you feel about Tierney's role, because when we've been good over the past few seasons, which unfortunately has been in fits and starts more than anything, I think Tierney has been a really key component of that. But lately, we have not seen his influence be as crucial when we've played well. And in some instances, we've played well, I think, without him necessarily being on the same page. Is this just a form issue in your mind, or is the change of system maybe giving Tierney a little bit of a different job that he's less comfortable with? Because he seems to be much less fluid attacking now. And there's just some warts appearing in his game that maybe we didn't see earlier.
Right. So I don't judge my fullbacks on how many crosses you get in. Right. I didn't judge Bellerin the same way, and I judge them in a different way. I judge them in their ability to defend, to be all court. By that I mean combining within your pod, right, in different ways. So can you go around it? Can you combine short passes? Can you switch to play with either foot? Right? Can you do these all court things? I think Tomiyasu is a great example of doing a lot of good things, but because of his slightly different profile, he's a centre back, right back. So he's happy defending his side. We roll around into a 3 on occasions, and we build that way, and then that's absolutely perfect, which gives, on a certain day, gives the left side license to really push on and be part of the 5 channels. On other days, we don't. And so I look at the roles and responsibilities and say, what are you doing? Are you keeping the ball? Are you defending your side well? Are you staying narrow with your left centre back? All these sort of fundamental things which make our defensive record really, really good, by the way. So I'm not overly concerned, but I do think sometimes in life you see opportunities, right? And there's opportunities to do different things. I take it the weekend, a slightly different role. Smith Rowe more likely playing that left-hand side. And we could see the Tierney that you like in this game, with Smith Rowe tucking in one lane and covering for him with Xhaka in that left-hand zone. And suddenly you'll say, Elliot, what a great player he is, blah, blah, blah. Do you see what I mean? And so I tend to look at it on more of a role and responsibilities thing and what you're doing on and off the ball than a flashing form. If you ask me honestly, and I am honest, and those on the Discord.
I'd like to think so. What would be the point of it?
I've been intimating this for a while. I don't think our left side is as balanced as our right side, funny enough. And the Tomiyasu, Odegaard, Xhaka 3 is top class, right? Mm-hmm. Top class. On the left side, we talk about Tierney, Xhaka, and Martinelli. Now, Martinelli is still learning positionally, although as a player, we have no issues there with him. But there are sometimes I think he's too wide, too long, didn't spin off the ball quickly enough. But that's all to come. He does some fantastic stuff, right? So it's not a complaint. He's 20 years of age, God's sake. So that's not a worry there. I do worry sometimes about Tierney's robustness and ability to stay injury-free. And I would like to see him rotated more to be protected for those big games and away games, where sometimes Nuno has struggled in away games in cauldron environments, shall we say. But some of the home games I watched earlier this year, particularly West Ham and Aston Villa, Nuno Tavares is outstanding. And where we need something at home, where we want to be in charge and push people back, there's a role for him to play. And I don't want to see this thing where you're in the first 11 and it's got to take an earthquake to get you out. Play the guy that's suitable for that day. And if, for example, Tomiyasu comes back and we really want to push on that left-hand side, make the change. No drama. If it suits the game that's available. We got Brentford the weekend, who are quite a physical team. Cedric was brilliant against Wolves, facing up against the wing-back. Against a more aerial Brentford, we might need something else. Make the change. If it means Holding comes back in, make the change. Don't get obsessed with the first 11. Just look at what you're playing and what's required, and make sure you apply your resources to deal with it. So, again, the left-hand side, I've got a inkling there, mate, that we could improve. And I'm not even mentioning your mate yet, Granit Xhaka. So there's an inkling there we can improve. But that's the exciting thing, isn't it? You go straight to YouTube and I think, oh, wow, I like that left winger. We can move him here. We can move people around. But that left midfielder to combine with our left back is the one that I sway on massively. What type of player there works for us, or what combination of players work for us? Because I think the central role is locked down. I think Sammy can underpin that as he gets older. But the left side of the diamond, the one I keep talking about, that rolls into a 6 and slightly to a left 8, that player has got a unique profile. And I'd be so interested to see what people think. I sway on it, mate. You may have thought yourself on what type of player that required in that role.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because there is always a temptation as a fan to want to see your team play the way you play with them in FIFA, right? And if you're setting up Arsenal on FIFA right now, you're probably trying to get in Martinelli and Xhaka and Smith Rowe and Odegaard, maybe even Pepe instead of Lacazette. You know who the fun players are, who the players who can score goals and create goals are, and you want them all on the pitch. Whether that's a realistic way to play or not is a different consideration, whether it can actually work in practice. And we're going to get to see, I think, almost certainly Smith Rowe play in the absence of Martinelli in this upcoming game. I assume he will just take Martinelli's role, and that will slightly change the dynamic of how we play on the left-hand side. But ultimately, that left side, if Martinelli's going to stay there, if he's not going to move centrally, that left 8, I guess what I would say to you, Clive, is if Odegaard can play the right 8, is there any reason we need a central midfielder playing the left 8? And I can't think of any particular reason. Now, maybe it's game to game. There may be games where you feel someone who's just a little more attuned to their defensive responsibilities, although that's certainly up for debate. Someone who's got, I realize experience is also a word we might want to throw out there because it is such a young team overall, and there are leaders on the pitch. But, you see what we have on the right-hand side with Xhaka and Odegaard, and on the left-hand side, we've got Martinelli and a central midfielder right now. Maybe Tierney is meant to be more of that support. But one of the things that we watched also in that game was the way Martinelli was playing. And I wouldn't say it was his best game, but just the way he is perpetually progressing the ball or going forward or looking to make a forward run. there was a moment in the game that we saw where it was, maybe it was Odegaard, I think. Odegaard gets the ball sort of near the top of the box, and there's a diagonal run available in behind the defense. The Wolves' defensive line had become broken, and Lacazette just pins the center back at the back post instead of making that diagonal run across across that broken line of the defense.
Yeah.
And one of the big debates, and I'll talk to Tim about this a little bit as well, but it's the question of, there is no denying, having watched again, that Lacazette is playing a very important role in making the system work. But what you gain with him right now, in terms of sort of overall fluency or overall contribution, you seem to be losing in the high leverage moments. Obviously, there's the pullback he hits straight at the keeper. There's the one-on-one that he doesn't score. There's the header that he doesn't get to. There's also a lot of moments where we just saw him not really making those runs that make you available for Odegaard to stab a little ball behind the defense, or for Xhaka to curl one to the near post. And so, is there a scenario where someone like a Martinelli, who's so progressive and so tigerish in his running and so hell-bent on getting into those spaces, where losing a little something in maybe your fluency and build-up is worth it for what you get added in high leverage moments? I mean, are you sold on the idea that for these next 16 games, we just persist with Lacazette, or is there another way forward?
Well, you're reading my mind here, right? So I think, as I was explaining to people about the different pods, the key about the central spine is that we ask those two players to do 1.5 jobs, right? So we expect Partey to deal with that, defend in front of your centre backs, also be the release valve for everybody else, and keep it unprogressive. So we really overburden that player. And fortunately, most of the times he can do it, right? So when he doesn't, we critique the value of the signing and go back to our stats and metrics, blah, blah, blah. But for me, he does that role very, very well. And we also overburden Lacazette because, he's a central player. He doesn't really have a striker ahead of him. He's meant to come back, work back, lead the press, and also combine on both pods on either side, and also get to the box and get shots off. We all know he doesn't do all of those things all of the time. But he's a critical glue player. He sometimes, as use Paul's phrase, corrals to press down one side, particularly maybe onto our right side. If they're clearing it down there, they're clearing it to Tomiyasu, who heading it back into our right pod, and off we go. Right. So, and I love 1.5 job players. Right? I love that. If you look at Martinelli, I think he has the skill set to do 1.5 jobs. I think he can press, he can harry, he can keep it, he can combine. And in the box, he doesn't switch off and have a rest. In fact, he switches on, And I think if you're looking for the next progression of Arsenal, adding a left winger with size and devastation and speed and carrying that attracts people to him maybe makes Martinelli the option at centre forward. Because the way we play it today, you need an all-action guy. Do you know what I mean? You need an all-action guy that does lots of different things. And if you can think of a more all-action guy than Martinelli, I'm here all week, right? So I think the more I think about it, I haven't always thought this way, Elliot, you know me. I think at this moment in time, where he plays off the left is great. But when we have that left option, I'm talking about a Xhaka clone with a right foot that drives, I would like a 6-footer, 6-footer leggy, so you can hit him in the air from distance. You know what I mean? And you can really have some physicality. Thinking for the summer, I'm thinking you need a righty from the left, and you need a centre forward, all action, tall target man. So you have that option, right? So, and that would be your two signing. You reincorporate Balogun into that framework, and you lose Lacazette and Eddie. Also, we just lost Aubameyang. So 3 for 3, right? And you incorporate that into your team, and I really like that. And I really like that. But the fact we've got a player who's 20 years of age that can kill it off the left, potentially kill it in centre forward spaces in that central zone, but also play some very good early games off the right.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem. Same thing that Man City do. They rotate their players. Foden, centre, left, right. Sterling, left, right. Grealish, centre, left. False 9. This is what we want. Good footballers that can handle the ball in different zones of the pitch and make us feel that our hope index doesn't disappear. And I think this is what's so exciting about this group. There's a great basis from which to build on. But if we add more penetration and devastation in wide areas, but also all action down the centre that keeps people near you, we're gonna get in somewhere, aren't we? We're gonna get in somewhere, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we want to be front-footed and we want to press and we want to turn turnovers into attacks, I understand. Again, I want to be clear because I feel torn on this as well. I don't think we have the perfect solution. I think we have a player in Lacazette who is doing a really, really excellent job of tackling back, of connecting play, of linking and playing in the other players. It's funny, he's linking but not stretching, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think in Martinelli, if you really just want to commit to, a situation where we are going to try to press teams off the ball and turn quick transitions into goal scoring chances, and that means that you bring in a Smith Rowe to play off the left, and you put Martinelli in the center, and you let him do what he does, chasing people down, and you play balls into him running in behind quickly, and you try to have, maybe you don't build the play as nicely in the middle as you would with Lacazette there, but maybe you create more high leverage moments, more moments in behind, more shots. The other thing you gain by doing that is by bringing in a Smith Rowe, maybe he drops in just that little bit more in a way that a Lacazette does, maybe not to central spaces, but so that he can connect, and you let that center forward just be an absolute nightmare for defenders to follow and track and try to keep the ball off of. And, we don't have to make this choice right now because I think we're playing well enough and picking up points. I mean, granted, January wasn't great, but like, it's not broken per se. It's not where we need to start to go and manufacture changes for change's sake. But I definitely think that, let's put it this way, Clive, if Lacazette wasn't available, that would definitely be the direction I'd want to go.
Yeah, we're looking ahead, right? So you mentioned Smith Rowe. This is a player that whenever I go, I can't stop thinking about him. But when I don't go and I'm watching on TV, I maybe don't appreciate how good he actually is. And what he's really good at, Elliot, is his ability to receive the ball is unbelievable. I mean, no matter how the ball's fired at him, the way he brings it in, controls it, turns around. It doesn't always turn around, but when he does, you're thinking, crikey, why didn't he turn around more often? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He really has got ability, and his ability to really make things happen and see things and execute in the final third is something that we really need. And so I know just because he wears his socks like Grealish, but he really is developing into that player. As someone who could play from the left, as somebody that attracts people and combines, but also I think he can play as a false nine. And I know we laughed when he did that, but he absolutely can play as that guy, potentially does the Odegaard role, a bit more central, receives it and connects into wide spaces. I think we just need to develop people that can do multiple jobs. Then we can all have fun about putting them in slots. And those slots should be different on any given day. That's how I look at the game. And I don't worry about Smith Rowe playing left. Smith Rowe playing left with Nuno on the outside, that really works. It really works. It worked very well in the games that I saw. So it's always about the balance. And I think sometimes, I don't like to be obsessed with first 11s. I just want to have good players. And where this squad is going, we want about 18 really good players that we're jostling for and arguing about where they're going to play and who should be playing. At a moment in time, that first sort of 12, 13, 14 is in our heads, and we're just hoping they stay healthy. So we're not quite there yet, but we're not far away, and that will change over the summer, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, we look ahead to Brentford quickly, and I think, Clive, they're one of the most tackling teams in the league. They are the most tackling team in the league, in fact. When we played them the first game, obviously missing pretty much every player you'd hope to have available for the first game of the season, none of the new signings, none of the key players that were prior to the new signings. And we went away to a ground that was rocking, coming up to the Premier League, to not just fans, but also broadcasters that were rocking in favor of Brentford. And it was a humiliating experience for us in many ways, and I think an unjust experience in some ways. And so we owe them one. I think it should be pretty easy for Mikel Arteta to get his team up for this one. Not that should really be the deciding factor. You should always be able to get up for it. But we know the threat that they bring. They're going to try to press. They're going to try to tackle. They're going to get into us. Obviously, we don't want to get mixed up too much in that because we'd like to finish the game with 11 men, which is increasingly difficult for us to do. But we know the very specific challenge that they're going to give to us. So I'm curious if you think we need a unique kind of approach to handle the way they play. I mean, look, their form has not been great. They are, roughly one of the less good teams in the league defensively and roughly one of the less good teams in the league in terms of attack, although they do have an excellent player at the top who can put away a chance if you give it to him and can bully center backs given the opportunity. So what do you think of the sort of, I don't want to make them out to be better than they are, but the unique challenge they present to us and how we might approach it?
So yeah, they do go back to front a bit. They spread the pitch much like Wolves do. But Wolves go to wing backs on first phase, whereas they can go to the front men and then drop it down, fill in behind and play from there, right? So this is why my inkling for Holding this weekend is that's where I'm going with it. Even though I said you had a great game last game, I would bring Holding in if Tomiyasu wasn't fit and play White as right back, because they switch it into that right-hand zone quite a lot. And White took a lot of stick for that first game. I thought it was very unfair, but that's the way it is, right? We didn't win. And also he played with Pablo Mari, and he won't be playing with Pablo Mari this weekend, right? So he'll be playing with Gabriel, who's not bad. He can jump out of his boots, and also he can run with anybody. So I'm not worried about that. If they give it back to us a lot, well, we know we can build from the back and we can play through teams. So I think the real issue for me is not defensively, it's what we do around the box and how the tempo by which we play at. And they have a back three in Christopher Ayer, used to play for Celtic. Janssen, I think he was at Leeds, wasn't he? And Pontus Janssen, and Ethan Pinnock, who's a player that I've been looking at for a little while. Comes from Jamaica, that's why I'm interested. And a very physical player, very good in the air, 6 foot 100, he jumped really high, and very good in collisions. And I just think we have to show some agility and speed around these guys and really play at a tempo, because they're big. And if we play, not that we can anyway, but if we play the crossing game a la Burnley, we're going to struggle. If we start running through people and really doing 1-2 combinations and cutbacks, I think we'll be absolutely fine, right? So think five-a-side football this weekend at tempo, and then move those big bodies around and keep them pressed back. And so they go long, we pick it up again with our base pod, and off we go, and we go into our wide areas and triangles, etc. So that's what I would do. I think tempo is important. I have the scar of Burnley in my head, and I want that gone. I've already forgotten the first 45 against Man City, where I was not talking about lack of tempo or anything. If we can get back to those levels, we're going to blow this team away. I think it's very important that we do, because I think the Wolves game, which I'll be going to, will be an experience. I think it's going to be a very big game for us. And but if we do Brentford, sorry, if we sort them out properly, and then we go to Wolves, and I would have said 4 from 6 before we played Wolves twice in 3 weeks, I'd have been happy with. But Brentford's got to be done. Wolves are a competitor. We cannot lose to them, but we must beat Brentford. They must be beaten, because the other teams won't lose to them, if you see what I mean. So they must be beaten. If we draw against Wolves, it's not the end of the world in the context of the 16 games, but the Brentford game allows us that slippage. But also, I don't want to see it happen. I'm just trying to put a bit of perspective.
No, I think the reason we got to win these games now is a few things. First of all, it's a run where United in particular have their hardest games coming up: City away, Liverpool away. The two Atleti ties wrapped around some of that, and they have Spurs. Then their running gets a little easier, not easy, but a little easier. Spurs, they have the easiest run into the three of us, but they've got some hard games coming up. The problem for us is the Liverpool and the Chelsea game have been pushed back. Plus, we have United and Spurs. So if we don't do well during this sort of, I will put easy in quotes, but easier run we have now, then we get ourselves back in the position where we're going to have to pick up some very tricky points, towards the later part of the season. I should point out, by the way, when we faced Brentford, one thing that's forgotten, I don't think it was a great game. We played with it. I mean, let me just remind people, who was playing. Leno in goal, Tierney, Marie, White, and Chambers, Xhaka and Lakanga, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Pepe, and Balogun. Now there are a lot of players in there that we would right now regard as pretty good players, but it was a pretty makeshift side. And I should point out also that, in that game, not that stats tell the story, but we outshot them 22-8.
Yeah.
I mean, we really did put them under some big, big pressure in that game. The problem was just they converted a couple of opportunities. Obviously the big issue I thought was Pablo Mari, who just, couldn't live. The center backs in general couldn't live with Ivan Toney. Like, I think it'll be a little different having Gabriel in there, obviously, and Ramsdale with his more progressive way of dealing with things. But I just think in general, we're going to have more of the ball now. We press more now. I think we look a little more press resistant now than we did at the time. So it's obviously a very different team and a very different situation. Do you expect, by the way, Tommy to be back for this game?
If he's fit, I would think about it seriously. But I'm not too worried about this game, if I'm honest with you. I think the Wolves game could be more important. Like I say, I would think about holding for this game just because of the fact they pay 3 monster centre halves, and it's just to help us defend the set piece when they do get them, which they will do, long throws, etc. But look, I think the most important thing is how we attack in this game. I really do. As I say, tempo, put them under pressure, move them around, keep that going for longer periods. We did it for literally 15 minutes against Burnley and we looked fantastic. It wasn't long enough. We ran out of juice, right? So we just need to do this for longer periods against Brentford, and I think we'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the real test, maybe even more than the opposition right now, is the pressure, right? Is knowing that Champions League football is there for us. You saw how much it meant beating Wolves. Every game now feeling like a cup final. It's cliche, but it does sort of seem like that's how the players are approaching it. And that can be a good thing, but it means they really have to stand up to the pressure. You think we'll get it done, Clive?
I think we will. Saturday night drinks are waiting for me. I can't wait.
All right. Well, I'm about to let you go, but before I do that, one of the things that we have to do before we can let Clive go is bore him to tears with the sponsors. And I'm not going to do an interesting segue. I'm just going to do them. We can hear him groan and moan, and then we can let him go. But I have to keep him so he can do the indeed at the end of it. So let's get this out of the way. The first thing to talk about, obviously, is Manscaped. I feel like at this point, if you haven't done this yet, then that's your fault, not my fault. Like, I've done my job. I've told you how great the products are. I've told you how great the deal is with the 20% off and free shipping. But again, it's about the Lawnmower 4.0. I'm going on a trip. I'm getting on a plane after recording this. And one of the things that I have to do as part of my pre-flight thing is shower and groom. And to get into that shower and see that Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 in the shower, I mean, it's such a joy. I know I'm not going to nick myself. I'm not going to be trouble. Get the body cleaned up quickly, effectively with those beautiful ceramic blades so that they don't nick. They have the skin-safe technology, a long battery life. I can then throw it right into the shed bag that they gave me, take it with me. I don't even have to bring the charger because the battery lasts seemingly forever. It's just so long. Wet, dry, great light, great product. And I can bring the toner, I can bring the deodorant, I can bring the cologne, one brand to handle all your body needs, all your grooming needs. Go to manscaped.com, use promo code ArsenalVision, 20% off and free shipping. Manscaped.com, promo code ArsenalVision. Get your 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Now, if your body is taken care of, then what you need to take care of as well as your business. And the best way to take care of your business is to hire the best talent. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Indeed, instead of spending hours on multiple job sites, spend it on Indeed. Hoping to find candidates with the right skills. You need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process through time-saving tools like Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. The offer is valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire to claim your $75 job credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed. Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Okay, but we go from strength to strength. Tim's here now. Tim's on Twitter at Roberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
So there was a fans forum the other night, a chance for Kedishem to talk to some fans and the fans to get some answers from the club about a variety of things. They talked transfers and things like that. We'll get to that in a moment. But I thought the most interesting takeaway was that they clearly listened to the podcast, because they were talking about renovating the stadium, which is something we had talked about on the last episode. I had expressed some concern about whether, renovating a stadium is really the Kroenke model, but they did say it needed it. Let's put it this way. In real estate, you have different types of houses, right? You have tear downs, right? Where you have to tear it down and rebuild. And then you have fixer uppers. And I think their suggestion is that the Emirates is a fixer upper. It needs a bit of roof. It needs some new screens. It needs some improvements. So let's start there in terms of, making the Emirates Stadium feel like the contemporary crown jewel that it felt when it was first built. How much work do you think really needs to be done? And do you think they spoke to the right things that are necessary to make it feel like it reaches that status again?
Yeah, 100%. And none of this is, enormously surprising. The stadium's 16 years old now, so it's not new, it's not old either. It just needs a few things doing to it. So those who've been inside the stadium this season will know that at least one of the screens has been on the blink for a few games this season, and obviously, high definition technology has updated somewhat since 2006. So, they're going to sort that out, and yep, completely understand that. The roof sounds like the kind of the most pressing. I did read somewhere that it leaks. I'm not sure that it leaks. It's got a deliberately slanted roof because it wants the liquid, like the rain, to find the turf, basically. But they've slanted the roof in a way that it doesn't go into the fans, but it goes onto the pitch. But the roof needs doing again, and that sounds like the biggest of the jobs. But yeah, those are like, and like the PA, the sound system is absolutely rubbish. Like, it's really bad. And actually, I think it kind of always has been. And again, that sounds a bit more long term. But I think in terms of, I don't think supporters notice those things quite as much as they do the fact that the seats are going orange and like paint is peeling off the cannons on the outside and things like that. So I think those things need taken care of the most. With the cannons, obviously they're consulting with fans on what they actually want on that wraparound on the stadium, and I imagine they'll do what Wembley and the London Stadium, West Ham do, and have a digital screen. I imagine that will involve some advertising as well, which is fine. Also, some people might not know this, but there is actually a really advantageous advertising opportunity, because if you get a train north out of King's Cross, anywhere north, you go past the Emirates Stadium and you go past the facade. So there's actually, like, if they wanted to turn it into advertising, there's actually like potentially non-match day advertising there, because they know trains are bolting past that stadium hundreds and hundreds of times a day, and effectively they've got a massive billboard there if they want it. So if they put up a digital screen, like on non-match days, they could advertise whatever the hell they wanted on there, quite frankly. I think maybe on match days Arsenal fans would want something a bit more warming and welcoming, but if they wanted to advertise, crypto or whatever the hell they want to advertise, like, I think there's an opportunity for them there. But yeah, I think it's the more cosmetic stuff that fans are noticing at the moment. And like, if you go into, some of the seats were painted like I think during lockdown, but some weren't. Like, mine certainly wasn't. Mine's basically pink now. So I think just little touches like that are really what's needed.
Yeah, it's a fixer-upper, right? I mean, anyone who owns a home knows that it's a perpetual battle against time and wear and tear, and so the Emirates is no exception. But the bones are good, as you said, and we can fix it up. It's funny, Tim, because a lot of people pointing to SoFi Stadium, and in particular pointing to like the screen at SoFi Stadium, and how impressive that is and whatnot. And like, the thing that you realize if you go to a football match, Premier League football match, versus going to an NFL game, and I don't know if I would strongly doubt you've ever been to an NFL game.
No.
Like, the overwhelming majority of time, nothing is happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
there's big breaks and
right. Yeah. Like, one of my favorite sports to go to is baseball. Let me tell you how much I hate baseball. I find it to be like watching paint dry. But you know what I like? Being outside. Yeah, go ahead.
I imagine it's a little bit like going to cricket.
It sounds like, exactly. You're outside in the summer at a stadium that has been built expressly for the purpose of having great food and drinks.
Yeah.
And so you drink phenomenal alcohol and you eat great food, and you're like, does anybody know the score? Does anybody know what just like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's some devout baseball fans listening that think this is sacrilegious. But my point is that when I was at the Emirates, I wasn't focused on the screen. I wasn't focused on, granted, I know the food can be better. A lot of people have complaints about that, but like, it really is a situation where 90 minutes you're sitting there transfixed on what's happening on the pitch, ideally, if you're not being bored to tears, with one break in the middle to try to hit the toilets and maybe get yourself a drink. And so what a stadium needs when the focus is what's happening on the pitch is very different from what a stadium needs. And like in football, for example, there's so much weird stuff happening that you can't necessarily see from your seat. So the screens become a way to actually see what's physically happening, or to be entertained in the interim periods. I mean, during the NFL. So like, just a very different set of needs from a stadium.
Yeah. And I think there's a excuse me, there's a couple of other things going on here as well. First of all, COVID has changed the way that people enter stadiums, and Arsenal took that break. I think out of necessity as much as anything, but with a year of people not coming into the stadium, they're doing things like my season ticket is now digital. I haven't we do have like a plastic card. I haven't used it all season because it's in my Apple Wallet and things like that. So they're upgrading the turnstiles because more people are using that now, and they just need to give the turnstiles a bit of love. But also because of COVID checks and things like that, which aren't happening as much now, but COVID is an ever kind of shifting landscape, and soon enough there will be another variant and cases will rise and there might be need to take some measures. What's kind of happening is people actually are spending more time in the stadium. They're getting in earlier. And so you had at the beginning of this season, for example, Arsenal did to their credit, they did a buy one, get one free beer offer if you got in within, no later than 45 minutes before kickoff, because, obviously it's a great moneymaker for them. Well, I don't know, actually, giving away a beer to everyone, maybe it's not a great moneymaker, but it gets people in the stadium early. And I took advantage of it several times. I really liked it. And so, the sense that people are getting into the stadium earlier, at least for now. And what a club like Tottenham have done, to be fair, Tottenham is different because Tottenham is just frankly not as nice an area as the one around Arsenal. Arsenal has a lot more pub, restaurant, food choices in the immediate area. But Spurs, what they've done is they have this enormous bar downstairs and they keep it open for a couple of hours after the game. And they just kind of say to people, why not have your post-match beers here? And they have good beer, and they do things like that. It doesn't seem like Arsenal have the same appetite to do that at the moment. Although I do understand they've put in more beer pumps because they've started doing it before games a little bit, and I do wonder whether they'll try. Whether they'll make. I don't see why they shouldn't try. Frankly, to do that, albeit. That wouldn't be great news for the businesses and the pubs around the stadium, but I don't see why they wouldn't try and at least say, because at the moment in the Emirates, the bar at Block 10, which is kind of the most busy one, that stays open for about 30 to 40 minutes. That stays open for one beer after the game, and then you've all got to get out. And that's kind of a bit crap, particularly in COVID. I've been taking advantage of that, and one of the guys I drink with after games is over 70. He's not completely understandably not comfortable going into pubs yet, so we meet at the stadium in Block 10 afterwards and have a beer there with him, and to kind of be chucked out after one, particularly in COVID times, feels a little bit unnecessary. But I don't know if this is stuff they'll look at though.
Yeah, what's interesting? This is going to sound crazy, Tim, but the Emirates wasn't a critical part of my match day experience when I went to the Palace game. And what I mean by that is, obviously it was, the game took place there, but I obviously did not have my pre-match or post-match drinks there. And the stadium had to provide me essentially one thing, a seat where I could see the action. And it did that suitably. And the rest was sort of, peripheral to me. And maybe it's because I'm used to the American stadium experience where I'm not transfixed by the sporting spectacle. So I demand more of the ground because I'm going to eat a lot and drink a lot and spend time in the concourses and wandering around and trying all the different food offerings because I'm making it more of an event than I am concerned with the game that's taking place.
Yeah. And you'll be in there several more hours.
Yeah, that's
NFL
actually an interesting point.
Baseball, yeah.
You're going to be there 3.5 hours or 4 hours in some instances. So yeah, I think you can absolutely turn the Emirates or update the Emirates to be an experience that is more than suitable for elite top level football. You have to put that elite top level football on the pitch, to be fair, but you get my point, right? I think
it doesn't need a lot doing.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't need to be an amusement park in the same way that some of the American grounds sort of need to be because they're not putting on a spectacle that people are quite as interested in consuming. So, okay. Let's pivot to a few more things that came out of this. They talked a little bit about transfers, and I guess the only thing I would say is, most of it is milquetoast stuff that you probably could have predicted the answers to, but I'm at least encouraged in the sense that they essentially acknowledge, look, we're in a good position, and January's not our favorite. It's not the easiest. We didn't find anything we really liked. And what we didn't want to do was make a mistake, right? I think the exact quote was sort of like, to get this club back where it needs to be, we need to make as many right decisions as we possibly can, and we need to be very disciplined. And I know that that bothers people because they just want us to go splash cash and bring in players. But I think we can agree that being disciplined and making good choices now, when the project is looking promising for the first time in a while, and the direction is looking encouraging, that we don't want to screw it up with a Willian, type signing where it's short term in thinking and doesn't provide the boost we need, and then we're saddled with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I thought the most interesting thing they said was they tried to bring things from the summer forward. And essentially couldn't, and that kind of encourages me. As much as you can ask whether they should have shown a bit more flexibility and things like that, and was there a plan B and things like that. I think that those are reasonable asks, but the fact that they were looking to bring stuff forward from the summer says to me that we know who we want the next signings to be, and we have known for a little while. And that's the plan we're working to. And therefore, their targets, it sounded like, are targets that they'll either revisit or that they had in mind for a little while. So it seems to me that they didn't do who else is available? Look, I've got time for the argument that they should have. I've got time for the opportunity cost argument. I've got time for the kind of, look, we've got a shot at fourth here, and even if you bring in someone quite good, you probably get it. But I do think Clive made an interesting point on the pod the other day that Arteta and hopefully Edu are trying to build a team not just that gets into the top four, but that stays there. So buying a quite good player might get us over the line this year, but if Manchester United sort themselves out and Conte stops being hilariously miserable about the team he's managing, then maybe a quite good player doesn't do it next year and the year after that, but we're saddled with that player. So I always said that as much as I think that there was an urgency, particularly for a striker, that I said halfway through the window in a weird way I'd be encouraged if they didn't do anything, because at least it means they're not panicking. And I do take a bit of encouragement from that, I have to say. And not least because I just don't have enough of the details about what else they were offered. And we're told that they were offered Icardi on loan and things like that. And I can't see him meeting the non-negotiables.
No.
I think if Aubameyang is a bit rich for your blood in that respect, I'm not sure Mauro Icardi is really gonna solve any problems for you. But I think tentatively, in lieu of some missing details, I think tentatively I back the club on this. I think I do.
I mean, I do as well. Would I like them to find something creative to make us just that little bit stronger? I would have liked it, but there's this presumption that it exists. And,
exactly.
Arsene famously said it's not a supermarket, right? You can't just pick products off the shelf. The options may have been an expensive long-term signing on a player that isn't who we want, or nothing. And I do choose nothing in that scenario. A couple of other things. They talked positively about Jack Wilshere and doing a lot of work with Pear in the academy, which is great, but no plans to integrate him in the first team. Fantastic to have him around. I think that's nice. I think Jack Wilshere is a big enough name and personality and connection to the club that, and I think interestingly, Tim, we always sort of think that the big success stories are the ones who can help the kids. But I think Jack maybe has a little bit of cautionary work he can do as well, in terms of where his career went wrong. Now, a lot of that was out of his control in terms of injury, but I bet he has a unique perspective on what it's like to be arguably the biggest young talent in the country and to not reach the heights that he would have liked in his career. And I think that lesson can be important for the young players.
100%. There used to be a guy until very recently involved with, I think, the under-18s, Ryan Gary. And Ryan Gary was a youth prospect at Arsenal in the early 2000s who was immensely highly rated. News didn't travel about academy prospects then quite like it does now. But
you mean there wasn't channel dedicated to him?
He was seriously rated though, and he was in the first team picture around 2002, 2003, but ended up having to retire because of a series of consecutive knee injuries. I think he only made like a couple of professional appearances in the end, but he was involved in the academy for a pretty long time. I think you're right. I think that is a unique perspective. I've also listened to interviews with Jack when he kind of first came to train with Arsenal a few months ago now, and he kind of said, look, if this doesn't work, I will start on my coaching journey. And I wonder whether he's already, like, I'm sure he'd be open to an offer, but he has been training with us for quite a while and he doesn't have one. I don't think he was ever going to get one from us, but whether he'd get one from somewhere else, I think, was the question. It doesn't look like he's got that, but I did hear him say in interviews, look, I'm curious about coaching. I want to stay in the game. I've started doing my badges. And I do wonder whether that's how Arsenal are helping him more than, at this point, more than like the training and staying fit and trying to get a contract. It strikes me that at the very least, they're trying to take care of both sides of it for him. And I do think that's like a good thing for them to do, because I can't see that he's in any state to play for Arsenal. He hasn't played professional football in over a year, and that was at Bournemouth. And, without being unkind, Bournemouth decided not to keep him on in the Championship. So I think that gives you an idea of what his level probably is at the moment, unfortunately. So if Arsenal can help him on his coaching journey, I think at this stage, that's probably even more positive than like giving him a couple of games for like Arsenal and him not being up to the mark and then nobody touching him.
Yeah. Well said. There was some stuff said about the Amazon documentary, nothing particularly revelatory there, but the last thing from the fans forum that I think would be good to dive into is just the questions and discussion around the partnership with Socios. Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Socios?
I believe so, yeah.
Look, we all exist in our own online bubble. And so maybe the bubble that you listening to this right now exist in is different. The bubble I exist in, people have a very negative reaction to this partnership. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, right, like I have tried to keep an open mind about, digital currency and tokens and non-fungible tokens and to try to understand it without bringing a lot of bias to the topic, because there's so much polarization online now with every topic, and you have to love something, you have to hate it. I understand all the reasons to be against this stuff, why people are very turned off to it. I've tried to keep an open mind about that space generally. And even there, even as someone who has tried to keep an open mind, I really find myself extremely turned off by the Socios partnership, extremely antipathic. It just I don't like it. How about that? We'll go with basic language since it's very early my time, before 9 a.m. still. I don't like it, and it does feel like scamming fans. And there's been a lot of dishonesty apparently in their advertising initially, and when it was promoted, they said there will never be any trading. This is not not saying you trade, and yet they are doing trading. In the terms and conditions, it appears that your token really only has any value for as long as the partnership goes on. So if the partnership were to end, your token may be worthless. There's sort of an illusory benefit of, you can, vote on what message the players see walking out of the tunnel. But like, I want to keep an open mind about the space, but this specific promotion feels like just, it feels like avarice for the sake of avarice. It feels like taking advantage of the fans, providing an illusory benefit for financial gain. And I like I said, I don't want to be a closed-minded person. I find this one pretty hard to swallow.
Yeah, same here. When you look at the most recent advert as well, there's a lot of small print at the bottom of the screen now, because this is still a pretty unregulated industry. Crypto, I'm like you, right, so NFTs, scam, okay? Pyramid selling, absolutely basic. I think I've said before, I've worked in financial fraud investigation, NFTs, all of the hallmarks of pyramid selling. Sorry. Crypto, I'm with you. I don't think that's quite the same, but ask yourself why this stuff is being aggressively marketed, because one thing that you probably know better than I do is when people make money off of something, they don't tend to go around going, hey guys, look at how I made all this money. I did it exactly this way and you can too. Like, people don't do that when they make money.
I would like to be able to say that I know that better than you do, but unfortunately I have to demur there.
But you know what I mean? People don't tend to share the secrets of their success quite like that.
No, of course. If you've got the ingredients, the golden ticket, you don't want to share it. Yeah.
But it's aggressively marketed for a reason. It's because they need more players in the market, and ultimately they need more players in the market because there needs to be money to be profited from. That's why stocks and shares, and you're not allowed to market those in quite the same way. And so this is such a new space. It's so unregulated. I'm with you because you're potentially in this for a lot more than like the price of a football shirt. Or a training top or something. And I agree. I think there's something very, very unseemly about you can do that. And like the way it's marketed as a like engagement and, having a say in your club and stuff like that. I agree. I think it's very, very grubby. And I don't like it either. And I think when you have to put loads of small print up, and this is only recent as well, because this is a very developing area in like fiscal law, and you're putting like lines and lines of T's and C's about like, what this is and what this isn't and things like that. Like, not for me.
And here's the thing, right? I tend to be the type of person who does not want to infantilize the populace. I think there's too much infantilization that goes on where we want the government or this group or that group to regulate things because people are too dumb and can't make choices for themselves, right? And like, I think that's condescending. And I think by and large, we should allow people to make choices for themselves and sometimes even bad choices or mistakes. Like that's part of life. But I think there are cases where there's exploitation and where something's exploitative or takes advantage of communities that maybe are less able to make those good choices. And the thing that worries me here is it is leveraging fan sentiment, which is a very exploitable sentiment, right? Mm-hmm. And probably doing it to some younger people. Now, I don't mean 6-year-olds, but maybe it's people in their early 20s with a little less financial literacy or, and by the way, I don't mean to be condescending because I'm not in my 20s and I still lack financial literacy. So, but it's the point that like you combine the love of a club and the loyalty of fandom, and you combine maybe some younger people who are a little more capricious in their financial decisions, and you create a sense of FOMO and you trade on that. And so that worries me a little bit. I'll pull the curtain back a bit here, right? Like, I consider the people who listen to this podcast a community. I talk about it as a community a lot because I feel very connected to everyone. And so when we do a sponsorship, we don't have betting companies as sponsors, although there's been a big push to do that because I can't quite get comfortable with it. We've had pushes to do NFT type stuff, and I haven't done it because I can't get comfortable with it because I don't think it's necessarily reflects a care and concern for the community. When we do a Patreon thing, I'd like to think that's good value. I think we try to put out a lot of good content, and I think people feel like they get something that's of value. And when I talk about Manscaped, like I do have the Lawnmower 4.0. I like that product. I think it's good. Arsenal is a community, and the fans are a community. You kind of have to protect them, and they have to be able to trust you. Trust that you're going to put a good team on the pitch, right? Trust that you're going to win football matches, but also trust that when you say you care about them and love them and want to support them, that it's not talk. Right? That there's something behind it. And this feels exploitative. And I think you want to always try to avoid in a community setting where there's a sense of loyalty and togetherness. You want to try to avoid exploiting that. And this just feels exploitative for me.
Yep. Completely agree. Undersign all of the above.
Yeah. So, all right, let's pivot as we finish off here to a topic that you've written about, which is Alexander Lacazette. There is a fixation on Lacazette now. Because because he's striker and striker's important, but because of Aubameyang leaving and because we don't really have anyone behind him and Nketiah feels less and less usable is harsh, but I'm going to say it, usable. Every other option is a trial type option, saying we're not sure of like, can Martinelli be a striker? And so there is a fixation on Lacazette. And because he's not scoring at the rate we'd like to, he just missed a couple big chances. And yet, he's kind of doing an okay job. He's kind of enabling the system to work. I do have a feeling that the fixation on him is also that people have decided if we're going to get top 4, it's going to depend on him doing whatever this job is that he has at a good enough level because there's nothing behind him. So you've written about Lacazette. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you've had to say and the fixation on Lacazette as the key to being able to unlock the door to top 4.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because this is the last few months of his Arsenal career. He's been made captain, which speaks to his professionalism, by the way. Everyone knows he's almost certainly going, and he's still been made captain, and he's always been regarded as a really good professional. But what I find really fascinating about this is his Arsenal career is being bookended by short half seasons without Aubameyang. I think the presence of Aubameyang has taken a lot of heat off of Lacazette. And when I say that, I don't mean he's deserved loads and loads of criticism and he's been saved from it. But like, look at the way Giroud's scoring record, for example, was kind of really scrutinised because we didn't have another guy. Right, he was getting like 20 goals a season, which is good. But we wanted the guy who gets 30 goals, like 25 to 30. And Aubameyang's been that guy that we have at the least have that expectation of. And so it's taken some of that off of Lacazette, which I think suits him both as a player and probably as a personality. That's gone now. And the focus is on, the pressure is on. And when you think about how Lacazette will be thought of by Arsenal fans once he leaves, I think it entirely depends on what happens in the next few months. Like, essentially, I think if Arsenal get in the top four, it will almost certainly be because Lacazette has played well. Whether he's scored goals or whatever, I can't see us doing it and him playing badly. I just don't think that mix really exists. So like, he has a chance to like literally lead this young team into the Champions League, not go on that journey with the rest of the team, to leave the young guys to it and say, all right, did my bit, I'm off back to Lyon now. And that's actually quite unique. But if Arsenal don't do it, and for example, he feels the pressure a bit and he continues to miss big chances, which to be fair, he doesn't usually do. He's usually quite good with big chances. The frustration with him, I think, is the fact that he won't try half chances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it just so happens it was the reverse against Wolves, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. He had 4 shots against Wolves, so that's good going. I do wonder a little bit whether he's feeling the pressure a bit, and that's, maybe partially explains the misses against Burnley.
Well, he apologized for the big miss, and well, I think there's something admirable about that in a way. I don't know mentality-wise if that's how like a really lethal striker does it, because their attitude is, don't worry, I'm going to get 3 next game.
Yeah, exactly. And time will tell on all of this. But yeah, I think it's a really unique opportunity for him because he could play really well. He could score the winner in the North London derby or whatever. And that's the thing. Like, if he scores 4 goals before the end of the season, like what let's just pluck that number out the air. What type of goals? Is it like, the 3rd goal in a 3-0 win against Brentford that we're definitely going to get on Saturday? Or is it like the winner in the North London derby, the winner against West Ham, like the equaliser against United? Like, what type of goals does he score? What type of contribution? It's almost certainly unfair to judge his entire Arsenal career on what happens in the next few months. But at this point, I'll reach for my Louis Theroux in The Porn Director analogy again, when he's berating this poor man who's having stage fright, and Louis Theroux says to him, do you think that's helping? And he just goes, that's the job. If he can't do it, I'll fucking get someone else to do it. and that's the job. That's the job for him now.
The problem is he can't get someone else to do it.
No, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, and it is the case that like everybody knows that's a position we can strengthen. It's going to get really exhausting repeating it for the balance of the season. Yeah. And so the question is like, can he do enough of things? The funny thing is, Tim, a lot of times when we get frustrated with players, we get frustrated with them, because they're not good enough, certainly. But also, maybe they don't feel like they're trying enough, or there's, as important to the project going forward. Well, whatever the case may be, there are reasons to get frustrated with players. I do think that Lacazette is a player who is playing for that next big contract, and he is giving his all. And I mean, we put the captain's armband on him last game, and I don't think that, look, it's been a cursed armband for a while now, so I don't think that tells you anything. But like, I can't fault the commitment that Lacazette is showing in doing a job that, let's face it, he is a striker. I'm sure he'd love a job where he could just stand on the edge of the box and occasionally get on the end of a chance and smash it in. But he's not being able to play that way. He has to tackle back. He has to connect and link play at the halfway line. He has to try to play in these young forwards. And he's doing it. And he's doing it, I think, pretty well, such that even without his own goal contribution, we're just about good enough,
Yeah, exactly. And he might, in his mind, he might not score another goal all season, but if Arsenal score loads, again, it's impossible to imagine that Arsenal will play really well in attack and score loads of goals, even if he scores none of them. Like, he will have a big part to play in that, one way or another. Again, I kind of think scoring no goals, that probably wouldn't happen, but if he scores like 2 or 3 or something, but yeah, like, ultimately what Arsenal do, like, a lot of it does depend on how well he plays. It is that simple, because like you said, we can't put anyone else in really. I mean, other than Nketiah, but that doesn't really seem like an attractive option at the moment. So, like, him more, like, I'd say really the players you're looking at the moment, like him, probably Thomas Partey, as well. He's probably the other one, the closest in the squad, for whom there just isn't a replacement really for what they do.
Especially in the role he has now as more of a base of a 3 instead of a double pivot.
Yeah, exactly. Like, nearly everyone else, you could say, yeah, we can replace them with someone of equivalent quality. No, but we can replace them with someone. But like Partey and Lacazette, those two, to me, those are the real pillars where, if we lose one of them for like a significant period of time, then for me, things look quite uneven. And that's like, Lacazette is not even that good, if that makes sense. Like, he is good, but do you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't usually pitch him as like the irreplaceable player in the team, but circumstance just makes it that way. So circumstance is what it is.
And like, everything's two sides of a coin, because Brentford were massively outplaying United. Not Brentford, pardon me. Brighton were massively outplaying United. One sloppy turnover at the start of the second half. Cristiano Ronaldo, top of the box, slams it in the corner. And they win that game. Then obviously Brighton go down to 10 men and whatnot. But like, and then you look at Lacazette, we're up a goal, down a man, in alone on goal, 1v1 with the keeper, misses. Now, we do go on to win that game, so it doesn't matter. But like, those are the margins. Not having someone who makes a game safe that otherwise might be dropped points. United have that. But the flip side of that coin is United have been playing like crap, in part because when Ronaldo plays, they don't look like a team. When Lacazette plays, we work. So you do have to see both sides of it, which is, okay, could we use the guy who can just slam it in from the top of the box? That would be nice. But at least we have a guy that enables a system that can help us play better football. And so we just have to take what we have. I'll finish with this question then, Tim. Is he sufficient in what he is doing that you just got to use Lacazette the rest of the way, 16 more games, 16 more starts, and get over the line? Or is there a scenario where you'd say, you know what, maybe in a home game against a mid-table team, maybe if he's had an off game or he's looking a little sluggish, I'm going to try Martinelli up there and use Smith Rowe on the left and switch it? Or is it really the case that this is not the time for tinkering? This is the time for just putting all your hopes on Lacazette?
Yeah, I think our best chance is continuity. I really
Fair enough,
do.
yeah.
I think maybe Martinelli in the last 20 minutes of a game, that's something we could do. Take Lacazette off, for Smith Rowe, for example, put Martinelli through the middle, particularly if we're in a position where maybe we're a goal up and there's a bit of space and we can counter. I think managing Lacazette's minutes is probably more about doing it in game than between games. That decision might be forced on us. Something might happen to Lacazette, but yeah, I do think that we've probably, like, I can't think of many games in this run-in where I think, oh yeah, just like, I mean, we've got Norwich at home, right? But even, like, I don't even think Norwich looked terrible. I don't think there's a team in this league I look at and go, oh god, yeah, we can definitely rest like Sheffield United last season. Like, that team doesn't really exist, I don't think. Like, Burnley are only bottom because they've played so few games. Like, yeah, I don't see, like, real, like, we played Watford at home and beat them 1-0, and they're in the relegation zone. So yeah, I just don't see many games in this run-in where I'd do anything else.
Yeah, Manchester City just won 5-0 away, I believe, in the first leg of a Champions League knockout tie, and they've had a bunch of tough 1-0s against the quote-unquote bad teams in the Premier League. Like, I agree with you. I just think the teams are well coached. There's enough talent. You're going to get lucky some games and blow a team away, but by and large, or get lucky with COVID absences like we did against Leeds or whatnot. But yeah, I because I think these games are all going to be tight, I do agree. You got to stick with continuity, and you have to hope you have just enough to get over the line. And part of it is hoping that the other teams don't get on a run. You know, the one thing that encourages me, and I think I said this on the last podcast, is it's not so much that I see Arsenal becoming all-conquering the next 16 games. I have a really hard time believing United or Spurs are suddenly going to turn into a very, very good team. You know, and so we just have to hope we stay a decent team and they stay not decent teams, and that could do it. All right, I think we can leave it there. We'll have an instant reaction pod after Brentford, and then all the regular pods next week. I know this was weird timing, Tim, so thank you for being accommodating.
My pleasure as always.
All right, my name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll have a lot more coming up, and a few fun guests that we have lined up. And next week we've got a midfielder extravaganza. We're going to look at midfield candidates for the summer as one of our midweek pieces of content. So I look forward to that. In any event, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoy the game. I'm sure it is going to be absolutely brilliant. We owe them one. So we love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Brentford 0.